Welkom back bij Expo 2. Tonight we're going to talk about simulation theory and all kinds of scientific stuff. Really interesting.
Ask this question that's been asked many times, many circumstances. If a tree falls in the woods and there's no one around to hear the tree, does the tree make a sound? Tom Campbell.
Well, first, there is no tree. There is no woods. There is no sound. If no one's there, then none of that is being rendered. Now, let's say there's a squirrel that lives in that woods. That squirrel is going to be aware, and the rendering through that squirrel will still take place. So in that squirrel's consciousness, in that squirrel's mind, it will see the tree, be aware of it, be aware of its falling, just like it would be if there were a person there. But it'll only be rendered to that squirrel in a squirrel's view. A squirrel's view is not the same as a man's view. A man sees different things and experiences different things than the squirrel does. So it would only be rendered to the squirrel in a squirrel's eye view of the tree falling.
Something that you share a lot of things that I'm a big fan of and I'm excited to get into. Your perspective is that the world that we're experiencing, would simulation be an appropriate language for that?
Simulation, virtual reality, computed, all of those things are accurate.
What does that mean for a layman person? How can a layman person digest and understand that as a concept?
If they are younger than I am, they probably have played a lot of virtual reality video games, and they can understand it in the same sense. And that is that when they're playing a video game, they are their avatar's consciousness. In other words, they make all their avatar's choices. The avatar does nothing. It just stands there and usually wobbles unless the player, who is the consciousness of that avatar, makes a choice. The choice to run or to fight or to jump up and down or dance or whatever it is the character can do. It's the player that animates that character. That's the consciousness. Also, from the avatar's point of view, the computer computing that virtual reality is non-physical. From the avatar's point of view, the player is non-physical. And that's because virtual reality cannot compute itself. The computation has to be done, as Dr. Fredkin says, in someplace else, other than inside the virtual reality. So now, what does it mean to have the concept that we are the consciousness, we're the player? The body we have is the avatar. Now, that is being computed in what I call the larger consciousness system, because consciousness is really an information system. And that shouldn't be so hard to understand, because what are you conscious of? Well, it's information you collect with your five senses. That's what you're aware of. And that's just data input. You take that data and you process it. You compare it to what's in memory. You try to understand it, and then you make a choice based on, well, what do I do with that? What do I do next? What's my reaction to that sense data that I get in? So what is it that takes in data input, processes it, compares it with memory, and then outputs? Well, that sounds like an information system. That's exactly what consciousness is. It's an information system. Part of that information system is computing this virtual reality. Part of that information system is experiencing this virtual reality. And why is that? Because consciousness basically communicates, makes choices, takes in data, processes it, and then does something with it. So that's communication. Consciousness evolves by lowering its entropy. Now, that's a big word for a lot of people. Entropy is a measure of disorder. Okay, it's also a measure of an ability to do something, to change things. Entropy can be seen in either one of those descriptions, and in physics, they show the equivalence of those two ideas. So we'll think of it as a measure of disorder. So what happens in an information system? What happens in consciousness? If all the bits are random, then there is no information. The system orders those bits with its intent because it's consciousness, it's conscious, it's aware, it has choices. It orders those bits, it creates information. And therefore, we can say that an information system evolves by lowering its entropy. When it orders those bits, now it's created order. There's less randomness. All right, so given that, then we have these pieces of consciousness that are interacting with each other. They need a context then to react within. Okay, that's important because otherwise they're just like in a big chat room. All they can do is communicate with each other. Well, how do you lower your entropy in that environment? Well, you don't very quickly. So they create another environment, a computed reality that has very demanding choices, life and death choices. How are you going to interact with the others that are there? How are you going to interact with the environment? Is it going to be to lower entropy, create more order, create more connection, create more but positive interaction? Or is it going to be higher entropy, division, disturbance, chaos? That's, returning to randomness. That's high entropy. So if we look at that, we see that the purpose of consciousness is to lower its entropy. That's its fundamental drive. It does that through cooperation, caring, sharing, compassion, because that's the low entropy interaction with others. Consciousness is a social system. Lots of individuated pieces of consciousness playing avatars. If within the context of the game, they have opportunities to, grab stuff from other people. They can be mean, they can be grabby, they can be selfish, or they can be nice, they can be cooperative. The not nice raises entropy. The being nice and helpful lowers entropy. So that's why the virtual reality needed to be created. That's who you are. You're a piece of consciousness making choices for an avatar. The purpose you have is to lower your entropy and therefore the entropy of the system by making low entropy choices. So now that was a long answer, but that ties it all up into one small package of why, if a tree falls in the woods and there's nobody there, that there really is no tree and no woods because nobody's there, unless a squirrel's there. And then it gets a squirrel's data stream. So look at it like the virtual reality you play. You're getting a data stream from consciousness. You're interpreting that data stream to be this reality. Now, when you play the game, your data stream comes from a computer. That computer data stream goes to your computer and lights up pixels on your computer. And you look at those 1 million pixels on your computer and you see running streams, rocks, people, houses, doorknobs. You see all the stuff. And no, you can't walk through the door. You have to open the door because there's rules. A virtual reality is basically created by a rule set, which says what you can and can't do inside the virtual reality. We call that science. That's what scientists do. They try to figure out what the rules are. So, physics, chemistry.
I hope you learned something and you subscribe, like, and comment.